Yours, Isaac.
Alrighty, good afternoon, folks. How's everybody doing today? As you are all muted. Oh, I love to hear it. This is great stuff. Alrighty. So as Rachel was saying, my name is Isaac Gonzalez. I, up until Friday, was a transportation planner with the Alamo Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. As of Monday, this coming Monday, I will be a transportation consultant with High Street Consulting. So for this week, 1 week only, I can be an unhinged, concerned citizen sharing this information with you. So with that, I will jump into my presentation. First, I'm going to go over growth in the region. And when I say in the region, I mean in the greater San Antonio and Austin areas. The growth that I'm going to be talking about is both realized growth between the years 2010 and 2020 and projected growth out through 2060. Then I will touch on the regional transportation planning efforts that go on in the same region. I will then tie in water conservation and preservation because while these plans and programs are transportation related, in essence, there are a variety of ways that we can and are encouraged to spend that money on things that can help in our water conservation efforts, like reducing transportation-related emissions and developing stormwater mitigation programs. Lastly, I'll open up the floor for some question and answer or discussion of some kind. And then hopefully after that, you all will be able to take this information and do what you all do best. First, regional growth. So the population is growing. I think everybody could see that ostensibly, but now that we have the 2020 US Census data, we can start assigning numbers to that growth. So the counties surrounding Bear and Travis are some of the fastest growing counties in the entire country. I'm going to point out Comal, Hayes, and Williamson. Those are each have grown about a little over 45% each since the year 2010. Comal County has grown almost 49%. And while it's no coincidence that the growth has been coming around the economic centers of San Antonio and Austin, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but not enough thought has been put into, from a political standpoint, how that growth is going to affect our Edwards Aquifer recharge zone, which you can see here overlaid on this map. Because of that, the housing has also been booming in the region. So these four graphs here show the estimated percent of housing built by time period. So you can see on the top left, before 1970, barely any housing development was happening in Comal and Hayes County. But since 2010, the housing development in Comal and Hayes County has been outpacing even that of inner city San Antonio and Austin. And this does not look to be slowing down anytime soon. So this is a population projection through the years 2040 and then through 2060. This is coming from the Texas Demographic Center, housed out of UTSA. I'm going to point out two specific ones here, Comal County and Hayes. For Comal County, the population is estimated to grow 95% by 2040. That number is estimated to continue growing to 262% by the year 2060. And Hayes is just ridiculous. Hayes County is projected to grow 113% by the year 2040, and then to a mind-staggering 316% by the year 2060. So what are we doing about all of that? Well, believe it or not, there are regional plans that we try and develop when we have this information in front of us. So the two big plans that come out of regions and states are the long-range transportation plans and the Short-Range Transportation Implementation Program. With AMPO, I was working on the Short-Range Transportation Implementation Program. So the LRTP has projects that TxDOT and local governments want to do between 5 and 20 years from now. And sometimes those projects are just figments in their imagination. They're glimmers in eyes. They're more objectives in nature than they are actual projects. The point is, we want to plan for them using this information that we have. The Short Range Transportation Implementation Program, the STIP, that has TxDOT and local projects that will be ready for construction within 4 years. Those have already gone through a lot of the planning and design phases, and they're at the tail end of getting their NEPA clearances if they need those. So their environmental clearances if they need those. In these plans, the projects that go into them, the objectives, the goals that go into them, when they're developed, locals have to have a voice. Federal law mandates that all urbanized areas with over 50,000 people have a metropolitan planning organization. In our region, we have the Alamo area, MPO, and the capital area, MPO, which from here I'm going to refer to as AMPO and CAMPO. Those MPOs are made up of your locally elected officials. So the ones who will approve and develop these plans, the folks who approve all of that are typically they're city managers, they're city council members, they are county commissioners. All of these folks are on these boards and they vote for the projects that are going to be taking place in the region. So the MPOs, they're tasked with developing the regional long-range and short-range plans and approving every single one of those projects that take place in the region if federal dollars are involved. Now, I say if, but it's a really small if, because federal dollars are everywhere. What I'm showing you right now are the 12 TxDOT funding categories. This is essentially a bookkeeping methodology to organize the projects that are taking place using state or federal dollars. Every single state has something set up like this, and it's just an easier way to dole out the dollars when they come in from the federal government. So big picture, Congress, the federal government, passed the bipartisan infrastructure law. They handed a huge chunk of money over to Texas and said, you need to distribute this money across the state. Now, every single one of those dollars comes with some kind of caveat, some kind of attachment to them, saying what they can and cannot be used for. So just off the top of my head, 10% of that money that comes in has to be put towards reducing transportation-related carbon emissions. So that's just something off the top of my head. So states, they can use their gas tax profits however they want. Local governments can use their bond dollars however they want. But when they want to use federal dollars, which is the vast majority of money that goes towards a lot of these transportation projects, the locals have to have a say in the projects that money goes towards. So how are the dollars distributed? The amount of available funds is known 10 years in advance. We know every year how much money each state is going to get per category, those 12 categories that I just showed. So there's a yearly breakdown by funding category that can be found on TxDOT's yearly Unified Transportation Program, the UTP, another acronym, because we love our acronyms here in government. I have a link to that at the end of this presentation that you can follow if you want to get a deeper look into it. I'm going to show an example in a little bit. The dollars are then further distributed by MPO. So here's that example I was talking about. This is category 5. This is the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program. Now, I know you can't see this, so I blew it up in this next slide. Basically, it's a lot of money. This is all the money through fiscal year 2033, excuse me, that we will be able to use, AMPO specifically, will be able to use towards congestion mitigation and air quality programs. And here's the kicker, is that there are hundreds of millions of dollars that aren't claimed by any project, any. So now let's tie in water conservation here. I'm going to point towards 4 key funding categories towards these efforts. So the first one I just briefly touched on, that's category 5, which from here on I'm going to call CMAQ. Category 7 are surface transportation block grants. I'm going to call those STBG. Category 9 are transportation alternatives, TA. And category 10 is the carbon reduction program. I'm going to refer to that as CRP from here on. So first, the CMAQ has to reduce ozone. That is a federal guideline. That money cannot go towards things like added capacity projects, no lane additions, none of that. It has to go towards reducing ozone. So those kind of projects include bicycle and pedestrian facilities, engine retrofits, traffic management programs. But for this particular bit of funding, that can only be used in Bexar County for now. There are EPA rulings that are going into effect over the next couple of years that may affect where else this money can be spent, but for the time being, this can only be spent in Bexar County. This funding, though, has a lot of flexibility. Have you seen any of those new ARC buses that GEAA has, or any of the new GEAA buses that are powered by natural gas? Those have been funded in almost in its entirety through CMAQ. TxDOT is adding turnaround lanes at highway intersections to reduce idling going on there, or not adding, they're converting the lane into a turnaround lane to reduce idling there. And then the city of San Antonio is going to start a traffic signal optimization program across the entire city in an effort to also reduce ozone emissions. But what else could we use it on? We could use it on traffic demand management programs, so programs that reduce trip generation and parking needs. That's very nebulous because it is. The federal government doesn't have an answer to everything. So if you can think of it, get the gears going, you can make it happen. It can also be used on public education and outreach programs and on inspections and maintenance programs. I know there has been some discussion in the news lately about tire particles that are breaking off and finding their way into our water sources. Well, this kind of funding can go towards projects like that as well. The next type of funding is STBG. That can be used on anything that happens on a road or a trail. So the eligible projects include anything that happens on a road or a trail. And I'm going to give you some examples right now. This has the most flexibility of any of the funding categories. So right now, TxDOT is going to start putting in a drainage tunnel and pump system up in Austin. They are paying for that. That's several $100 millions out of STBG money. Hayes County is relocating a Union Pacific rail siding in Kyle, Texas. That's also being funded with STBG funds. And then the city of Converse is expanding lanes on Topperwine Road. And I put this one in here just to show that this one can be used towards added capacity projects. So if that money isn't going towards other things, you will find that there are a lot of people in cities and the state that are chomping at the bit to use this huge allotment of money towards added capacity projects. Much like the one you see happening in 1604 and on the far west side. Part of that is being funded with STBG funds. So just a note on that. But what else could we use it on? Well, we could use it on stormwater mitigation. We could use this on rail of any sort. This money can also go towards surface transportation planning, so land use plans, complete streets guidelines, and resilience studies. And it can go towards non-motorized transportation activities, including recreational trails. And this funding does not have to stay in any county in particular. This funding can go towards any of the counties or cities or what have you in the metropolitan planning area, which as of right now is a 4-county area around San Antonio. And then Campo, I believe, has 12 So they also receive funding from this category, and they can also use that funding towards similar programs. Now, the transportation alternatives, that's category 9, if you're keeping track, that can only be used on transportation alternatives. So none of this can go towards anything car related. Eligible projects here include bicycle and pedestrian facilities, recreational trails, and safe routes for schools. This also has a lot of flexibility. This used to be an STBG funding category, but then the federal government took it out and made it its own thing because far too often that money was being spent on things like added capacity projects. So that money, the city of New Braunfels, they're currently in the development process and will start construction on complete streets in Green Historic District. So over the next couple of years, you're going to see some construction going on there, but it's going to go towards this larger effort of following complete streets guidelines in the city of New Braunfels. The Brooks Development Authority, they just applied for and won funding out of this category for a 7.5-mile green loop trail down in the Brooks city-based area. And then UTSA are going to be developing a shared use paths around 1604 to provide safer transportation alternatives for students that live on either side of the major highway 1604. And what else could you use this on? Well, similarly, you could use it on stormwater mitigation. We could use it on rails to trails projects, so converting abandoned rail lines, railways, right-of-way into trails that people can use for recreational purposes. You can use this money for historic preservation and rehabilitation of historic transportation facilities. And when I say transportation, again, this can mean trails. This does not necessarily mean just something on a road. We can use this towards wildlife and vegetation management. And we can also use this on safe routes for non-drivers. So again, pointing towards that UTSA example. And then the carbon reduction program, that has to reduce carbon. So the eligible projects here include literally anything that reduces transportation emissions. So this also has tons of flexibility. So an example here, Campo has a travel demand management plan, which includes, and you'll see that in the image over here on the right, that includes providing ride sharing opportunities, so carpooling, multimodal opportunities, and developing land use plans for the region. TxDOT is going to start putting in a green T intersection at SH 46. That's just north of 1604 if you're not familiar with the area here. But they're trying to get ahead of the curve, knowing that SH 46 is going to be a regionally significant roadway for the long term. And then New Braunfels are developing pedestrian and drainage improvements all along Psalms Road, so that connects to I-35. What else could we use this on? We could use this on a congestion pricing program. We could use it on projects that support alternative fuels, so EVs and hydrogen. Dallas is using it on a hydrogen fuel cell program at the moment that they're currently working towards developing. It can go towards construction planning and design of off-road pedestrian facilities, and it can go towards just generally public transportation projects. Now, the one thing I really want y'all to take away from this conversation is that nonprofits can get in on this action. So nonprofits and public entities can partner with local governments on these projects. And when I say partner, I mean like they just need like a signed letter from the local government saying that they are okay with it. So as an example, Brooks Development Authority, they are not a city, they're not a town, they are just they're a development authority who are looking to convert this old military space into mixed use land that the community can use. UTSA, they're also not a city, but they're a public entity, and they are partnering with Bexar County to install those shared use paths around 1604. And then I'm sure a lot of y'all here are familiar with Great Springs Project. They haven't started applying for funding yet, but we have helped them identify, us in Campo have helped them identify funding that they can get through these means here. And so when they are ready to pull the trigger on that, and submit a project for the call for our call for projects, then more likely than not, they're going to receive that kind of funding to help in the development and construction of that trail. And that is it for my presentation. I will now open the floor up for any kind of discussion or question and answer session.
20 minutes. We have the virtual room, I would say, until 4:30. So you have about 35 minutes to grill Isaac.
Thanks, Isaac. I do have a question that came into the chat from Amber Graham. She had asked on category 5, she believes, could the money be used to build something like the Pearl, where there's a residential area right next to restaurants, farmer markets, shopping, and so on?
It can be used not towards necessarily building like housing and the like there, but if there are ways that we can reduce ozone emissions, and there are a lot of cars there that just hover around, they're looking for parking, and all that ozone just builds up in that area right there. And when I say that, I do mean like constructing better road designs in the Pearl area. Then the money can absolutely go towards that. It can go towards figuring out better ways to connect the roadway system within the Pearl. And there's that exit off of 281 onto Broadway where traffic just backs up terribly. And I know San Antonio in their traffic signal optimization program, they're going to try and figure out how to better fix that light there at Broadway, and I think it's Grayson. But regardless, that money can go towards anything that's going to help reduce the idling and help keep traffic flowing. So that is, if you think it, you can make it happen. I will say no housing on any of that kind of stuff, but again, anything that can help the flow of traffic move faster or reduce traffic in that area. So specific bus shuttles, more buses that go towards the Pearl and back, micro mobility options that can reduce the car traffic in that area. All of that can be funded through the congestion mitigation and air quality program. And just a note, I do have references here in my PowerPoint that if you want, I couldn't list everything out, obviously. I would have loved to, but you can follow the CMAQ Essentials reference here, and it'll show plenty of examples of the different kinds of projects that you can and have been funded using CMAQ.
Awesome. Thanks, Isaac. Amber, if that answers your question, just let me know in the chat. Alan, I see your hand raised. I'll open the floor to you, okay?
So all the growth projections for San Antonio are based, I guess, on the state demographer. Do they factor in the fact that a lot of people are now leaving San Antonio during the summer because it's too hot? I have lots and lots of friends who I mean, I'm one of them. I'm in Big Bend right now because San Antonio is too damn hot. Are we going to see a shrinkage in population rather than a growth if the heating trends continue?
I do not know, honestly. I know that Dr. Yu, she puts together that projection every year. I'm not entirely sure. That projection I showed you was a projection from 2023. So she had taken relevant data from the years 2020 through 2020, June of 2023, using the American Community Survey to identify those trends. And up until June of 2023, it looked like the growth was on a steady climb. As for if those results have changed a year later, now that I'm showing you that, I cannot say entirely. But that is absolutely something I can get in touch with Dr. Yu about.
Thanks, Isaac. Alan, that answered your question. Just give me a thumbs up before we can get more information to you. Okay, fair.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I understand. On the chat, I have two questions. I have a handful of questions. Looks like author Dawes. There's a two-parter with this. First part, they ask, can rail be funded?
Yes, yes. Rail can be funded. With CMAC, we can only fund rail up until the county line, Bear County line, which is kind of silly, but them's the rules. I don't make them up. With STBG funds, we can fund the entire rail line all the way through Austin. Austin does have to contribute their part. The STBG funds are only to be spent within the region. So our funding would have to stop at the end of Comau, and then Campo would have to meet us halfway, basically. And when it comes to the carbon reduction, similarly, we can also use that money towards rail, or even not even if it's not high speed, far off rail, cable cars, trams, the streetcars, those kinds of things. Those can also be funded using these sources here. So if we were thinking maybe like, okay, let's not shoot for the stars real quick, and let's like, try and work on getting rail in some in some like smaller enclaves within San Antonio that aren't really like reachable by bus, then those are absolutely possibilities that AMPO can fund through these different funding categories here.
Okay, thanks for that. The second part to Arthur's question is asking, can remote parking be funded? Remote park, yeah. Arthur, you may I may ask you to clarify what you mean by remote parking in the chat to help us better answer your question. So while we wait for Arthur to clarify about that, I'm going to go over to Deb Youngblood's question. She asked, this is all great for San Antonio and Austin, but what I think about is how fast small towns in Hill Country are growing. How can those small towns access these programs?
And well, the Alamo area goes all the way out through Kendall County, through Comal County, and through Guadalupe County. We're going to start going into Medina County soon. So Bernie, New Braunfels, unincorporated Comal counties, they can all ask for this funding here. And there are hundreds of millions of dollars that aren't assigned to any projects yet. And so they could request these funds and then be able to utilize them towards projects in their regions. They all have members on AMPO's Transportation Policy Board, which is the ultimate deciding authority for the projects that go on in the region. So they all have county commissioners that are also on the board. And it seems that they just need a little push. Just, how it is with some of these politicians where you kind of need to like bake the pie for them and give it to them for them to eat out of the pan. So it's sort of the same idea here. This is where y'all's groups really come into play here, because y'all can be the voices that package this information up and lay it at their feet to use. Because oftentimes, and I know I can speak to this from visiting Kendall County and Comal County, a lot of people don't even know what AMPO is, what an MPO is, what it does. And there are literally billions of dollars that are coming through our organization that, because the counties don't know that they have that funding available to them, TxDOT is just grabbing at and building the craziest stuff out on the north side. So they have access to this funding. It's just a matter of them knowing that this funding is available to them and then knowing what they can do with this funding. Those are all things that the MPO can do better at. I'm not with them anymore, unfortunately, but the next best thing is to get this information to y'all so that y'all can then turn this over to them.
Sounds good. Thank you for that. Deb, let me know if that answers your question. Arthur did clarify what he meant by remote parking. He was asking more about parking with rail access to other lines, like trams at airports.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. So this kind of funding can go towards that as well. I mean, this isn't exactly the same, but it's in the same train of thought, if you will. We have and are continuing to fund park and rides out. There's a park and ride out in the Stone Oak area. There's one over just outside of New Braunfels for VIA. We can fund all of those. So the construction of them and any of the shuttling services that go on there, we can also fund through a lot of these funding categories here, and they have been. So VIA has been very good about getting this money and using it towards their buses. But when it comes towards something like a rail line or something, there aren't any real authorities that are stepping up to take that challenge.
Sounds good. And no, Arthur had another clarification, but I'm going to go to Amber's question. Amber mentioned, how do we keep up to date on funding availability and what projects are being funded?
So the funding availability can be found on TxDOT's Unified Transportation Plan. Again, I have links to that here in the references. We're going to make this available for everybody so that they can see it. And it's here, for example. So reference 4 has the plan. And you'll scroll all the way to the appendices. I wrote on here which page I went to, page 201. And you can see that information to see from now until 2033, 9 years out in advance, the funding that is available. For the amount for what funding the projects are going to, you can go to the MPO's website. So there's the Alamo area MPO, and then there's the capital area MPO. On their website, they have under plans, both of them have a toolbar that says plans. You can go to the Transportation Improvement Program and see all of the projects that have one kind of funding or another on them. And it'll tell you exactly what category they're being funded out of, what the description is, what the roadway is, where it's taking place, the limits of the project. So you can see, oftentimes they have GIS maps too that you can physically see. Like I just showed y'all the New Braunfels one, the complete streets on Green Street in the Green Historic District. So that information is there. Again, we've done from the public sector side a terrible job at showing people that it's out there. But it is out there. You can see that. So you can see where all of these dollars that have been assigned to projects, where they're going. I will tell you that most of the money from our congestion mitigation and air quality has been going to TxDOT. And that's primarily because nobody else is applying for the funding. So with that, when you see that, you're going to scratch your head a little bit and think how is this reducing air? But but do know that is because it oftentimes comes down to default. So again, the point of this is to hopefully get you the information so that you can get them the information.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Back to Arthur. He asked, are there rail design? I guess he's clarifying on if there's specs that need to be followed if rail ultimately does get funded.
So yes, there are federal guidelines that do need to be met if you're using federal dollars towards the project. So there would need to be environmental clearances that happen. My pipe dream personal, and I hope y'all take this with y'all and run with it. The federal government can just give any kind of federal right-of-way over to local governments or state governments for use in mass transportation efforts. So an example I'll point to is out in Virginia. Washington, D.C., they recently redid their orange and silver lines out towards Dulles Airport, if y'all have ever been out in that area. Well, the Silver Line runs right down the middle of an interstate, a very busy interstate. And a lot of that funding, it wasn't really funding. They got the funding from the federal government, but they didn't have to buy any land, any right of way, because it was already federal right of way. So the feds just signed that median over to Washington, WMATA, Washington's Metro Authority, and they took it and ran with it. And so now if you go out to Dulles Airport and you take the Silver Line downtown, you will be, for a good chunk of it, in Virginia, riding down the middle of the highway. So that's my pipe dream with I-35. But if you aren't going to go ahead and do that, and you want to just build it in, let's say, areas that there already exist rail, so like Union Pacific lines that go out towards New Braunfels, a lot of this money can go towards purchasing those. And then the only thing then that the local governments and the states need to do is work on the actual design and putting it up for environmental clearance. And so those are not difficult. They are just a little long because obviously, you're dealing with, anytime you're dealing with environmental clearances, it does add on some time to it. But that is pretty much the extent of the federal regulations there.
Okay, thanks, Isaac. Rachel, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, we can go to Pam's question first, and then I can
Okay.
ask my.
Yeah. So Pam Peck mentions her recollection is that the rail line between Austin and San Antonio hasn't happened because owner of existing rail line doesn't feel it has capacity for commuter use. Could money be used to fund a new rail line for commuters between San Antonio and Austin?
And the answer is yes. Yes, it absolutely can. It has been done already in different states. And it's just really a matter of the will to do it, really. It seems like there's this sort of like cyclical nature towards this rail discussion where everybody gets, yeah, we're going to do it. And then there's like a hangover of some kind where they don't want to do it anymore. The money is there. The money is there. The money's always going to be there. It's a matter of will. And I think if we can put the money aspect in the politicians' feet and show them that this is totally doable and there is no financial reason why we aren't doing this, then we can kind of bully or corner them into coming out in support and actually taking the initiative to steadfast a program like this.
Awesome. Thank you. Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Perfect. So I had two questions I wanted to make sure that we got answers to before we wrapped up. And I know we still have a couple other questions in the chat, but the first one, kind of getting to Deb Youngblood's point, is that Campo has quite a few counties, Ampo has quite a few counties, but it's not all of the counties in what we typically think of as the Hill Country or the Greater Edwards Aquifer region. Do you know, first part of the question, do you know if people or counties outside of the current existing boundaries of Ampo and Campo, can they request to be included into either of those two MPOs, or do they need to be in those urbanized areas?
No,
like
they
Hayes
can
and
request
Kendall?
it. They can request it if they want. It would go up to a vote of the actual MPO. So the MPO board of local politicians and the like, they would be the ones to vote on whether or not that county can actually join. But in place of an MPO, those rural areas out there have rural planning associations. So in the same way there's a metropolitan planning organization, there is a rural planning organization. For the most part, all of those rural counties out there, their rural planning organization is TxDOT itself. So TxDOT gets those categorical funds, and then they do what TxDOT does with that money. So For those counties, if they want to have a little more say in where those funds go, they can talk with their district representatives from TxDOT and see what is available to them. I can't speak again to what exactly is available to those rural folks, but in that unified transportation plan, TxDOT does lay out exactly how much money is going towards TxDOT districts if there isn't an MPO for that area. So if there's a rural county out there that is a part of a larger TxDOT district, that district will get the MPO, what would be MPO money, they get that in place of an MPO, and then they disperse it across the entire rural area.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, last question before we make sure we answered Shannon's. So I know you've covered a little bit, but I just want to one more time ask, for those of us who are not elected officials, county commissioners, city council members on the board of AMPO, we're members of nonprofits or we're just concerned citizens who have good ideas for these types of projects, do we just come to our representatives on the board with the ideas and ask them to submit these projects during the request for projects?
Yeah, you absolutely can. I mean, that's the most direct way. What you can do also is maybe request a meeting with like a city engineer or a county engineer, that maybe a project manager or something with one of the cities or counties. This doesn't necessarily have to start at the top with, because I know they're very busy and it's going to be very hard for you to probably get in touch with them. But this whole effort here can start even at like a project planner level within the cities and stuff. You can start the idea there. You can make the contact there. More often than not, they're very open to these kind of discussions. I mean, Brooks got in touch with a planner from the city and they just kind of hashed out that 7.5 mile green loop that's going on down there. UTSA just reached out to somebody from Bexar County and just asked if they could do this, and it was kind of like a last minute addition. This shared use project that's going on out at 1604. So these things can just kind of come up spontaneously, and that's for a lot of reasons. That's why like we always seem kind of behind the 8 ball, because we're not thinking that far in advance. It usually just like is something that we need immediately, and then we put it in the plan. But if you have your ideas, and even if they're big and grand, you know, we have a long range plan that the MPOs are trying to get more use out of. They want bigger and better projects in those long range plans so that they can put some, once they're in the plans, you can start designing them, you can start getting federal funding to plan for them, you can do all those kinds of things once they're in the long range plan. So how it gets there is sort of a choose your own adventure. It doesn't necessarily have to go through your local elected officials, especially if it's hard to get in touch with them. But if you can get in contact with somebody who works at the cities or the counties, and maybe get a meeting with them, get some kind of discussion going on it, then this would probably be the easiest way for you to get those. Because even if you get it on the long range plans, again, funding becomes available to begin planning for that. You can do studies for it and get the federal government to pay for it. So that doesn't have to come out of y'all's pockets, for example. The thing is, you got to get it in the ear of those folks over there, and then from there, they are the ones who are in an official capacity can put it into these long range and short range plans.
Awesome, thank you. That's really helpful.
Mhm.
I'll kick it back over to Nathan to finish out the Q&A if there's any more, but I know Shannon asked if you could clarify what the funding category and source for stormwater management was again.
Yes, so there are several. Here, let me see if I can show them to y'all. So this one is, so the transportation alternatives, that's category 9. Let me see. Category 10 can go towards drainage improvements. And then category 7, STBG, can also go towards stormwater mitigation, and then even like larger efforts, because there are usually hundreds of millions of dollars in those surface transportation block grants.
Thanks, Isaac. I appreciate it.
For sure.
Looking on that chat, and then also, Shannon, I do want to let you know, everyone mentioned on your little chat that this presentation is recorded and it'll be available up on the GEAA website by tomorrow. So stay on the lookout for that. I believe Brian Hummel mentioned in this conversation, he said great information, and he was curious if you have worked with Robert Peche at the EDA before, Isaac?
I have not, no.
Okay. So let's see. Okay. Okay. I have one more question. It's almost 4:20. I think we have time for like one or two more questions before we kick it off for the day. So any last comments, issues, questions? George, I will get to you as soon as I get through this question from Amber. And we'll go from there. Amber has asked, what happens to the unused money from a past year?
That's such a great question. You see, I like this group. This group asks wonderful questions. So if that money doesn't get spent, oftentimes it'll just get taken to a different MPO. So if you use it or you lose it. So it has happened a couple times where money from like Houston, and God bless Houston, they could use this money a lot more. They just don't have, well, I don't know what's going on for Houston. I'm not going to badmouth Houston just in case they're watching this. But they have had federal dollars that were given to them in a year. They didn't spend them in 4 years, the 4 years allotted period that they have to spend that money. And then it was just taken and given over to, I think it might have been given to Dallas's MPO. But oftentimes if the funding isn't used, it's going to go back up into the state pool, and it's going to go to somebody who's ready to use it.
Okay. Thank you, Isaac. George, I see you have your hand raised. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Great information. I'm going to lump a couple of things together, and just to make sure they're clear in my head, and you can tell me if they should be lumped or unlumped. You talked about wildlife, you talked about trails. I've worked on some projects with TxDOT where they will put aside purchase land for endangered species mitigation, for example. Some of that land tends to be over the recharge zone, so it also is aquifer protection. The city has had this aquifer protection program going out and buying land. A lot of that land is to the west, where land is cheaper. So kind of lumping all that together, if I hear you right, then this program could be used to, let's say, supplement city purchases in the areas where there's more construction activity, road building activity, like Bexar County, Comal, etc. So
you're right on it. You're exactly right to link those together.
Okay.
That's specifically why I put like that wildlife management there, because we can use this funding to help preserve those areas out there where, you know, wildlife is endangered, or we need to help usher them into their own areas here. And so we have used funding towards stuff like that before, but not nearly as much as we could, especially in the recharge zone. So yes, good eye on that. Yeah, you can. You absolutely, or they absolutely can.
Okay, thank you much.
Okay. Okay. I believe that's all the questions I have on this. Last chance, everyone, for anyone that has any last minute questions, comments, issues, concerns, leave it out there before we go. But I just want to thank you, Isaac, for a great presentation. As I mentioned, this presentation is going to be recorded. It has been recorded, and we're going to make the PowerPoint available up on our Water Wonks series website on the Aquifer Alliance webpage. And I am going to go turn things over to Rachel to wrap things up and talk about our next lecture series in July. So, Rachel?
Yeah, thanks, Nathan, and thanks, Isaac, again for a really interesting and hopefully very productive future activities that come out of it. So for everyone who's still here and still on, our next lecture will be July 24th. That's lecture number 7, so halfway through the year. Thanks for all of those who've been here on all 6 so far. The next lecture is the effectiveness of using green stormwater infrastructure for meeting urban challenges. That should be a really interesting talk. It'll be Lee Marlowe. She's the sustainable landscape ecologist at the San Antonio River Authority. So she's going to talk about the River Authority's efforts at installing a variety of green stormwater infrastructure practices on multiple urban properties that serve as demonstration sites showing the varied stacked benefits that can arise from GSI applications. So it should be really interesting, and I encourage you all to sign up. And if so, we'll see you in a month. So thank you all again.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great one. Okay.